So I am Roy Capani, and I am a trustee here at Meridian International Center, and I am honored to be able to moderate this session with Ambassador Bonnie Jenkins, who's currently the Shapiro Visiting Professor of International Affairs from George Washington University. So I'll just give you a little background on the ambassador, and then let her add some of that. So as global security challenges are growing more complex, and from great power competition to emerging technologies and regional instability, trusted partnerships among allies have never been more essential. The next generation of defense and technology cooperation will require not only innovation and interoperability, but also enduring commitments to transparency, safeguards, and shared values. Few leaders are better positioned to discuss this than Ambassador Bonnie Jenkins, who recently concluded her tenure as the Undersecretary of State for Arms Control. Um, she oversaw U.S. efforts on deterrence, nonproliferation, international security cooperation, and including leadership on the department's implementation of AUKUS, the trilateral partnership between Australia, the United States, and the United Kingdom. Her distinguished career spans diplomacy, law, academia, military service, and includes her earlier work as special envoy for threat reduction as a key U.S. delegate for nuclear security summits. So, Ambassador Jenkins, welcome.
Thank you.
Um, One of the things, yeah, I put together a few questions, but we'll make this interactive and they'll have an opportunity to have other folks talk a little bit about this. But in the face of the increasing conflict deterrence challenges that are coming up, what are some of the more promising ways for allies to strengthen and coordinate deterrence?
Well, thanks for the question. And of course, thanks for the invitation, and it's great to see everybody here. I'm glad that we started out by talking about AUKUS because AUKUS is really a new way to try to address some challenges dealt with, in this case, about the Indo-Pacific, and trying to make sure that the Indo-Pacific remains open. And so we decided to establish a relationship with the U.S. and Australia, the UK and Australia, who we've had very strong relationships in the past, to try to figure out how we can address the issue of keeping the Indo-Pacific open. And so we decided that we would help by establishing with them this partnership, which would provide them with nuclear-powered submarines, not nuclear weapons, but nuclear-powered. And also, it has two pillars. The first pillar being the submarines, but the second pillar being ways in which we could work together and become interoperable in terms of emerging technologies. And so far, I mean, I left the government in December, but my understanding of things are going well together. We're also looking at bringing in more partners, but it's a new way of trying to do things by looking at which countries are the best ones to work with, who has the type of technology that would be helpful, and working across a number of countries. In this case, originally three, and hopefully more.
Yeah. Well, we know Pillar One of AUKUS is the actual submarine platform itself, trying to expand. I think even our own industrial base to try to move maintenance and other types of operations to forward locations like that. But there's also Pillar Two with it, which starts to cover things like cyber and other emerging technologies. How should alliances adapt to embrace some of these technologies together, again, in the spirit of deterrence?
Right. Well, first of all, I think it has to be a recognition that we need to adapt and we need to bring in these other new types of technologies, which can sometimes be challenging because sometimes some countries don't necessarily want to do that. But really helps by working together and finding ways in which we can integrate from the very beginning. Find ways we can have our scientists work together. During August, there was a lot of engagement with the private sector, ensuring that they were on board for all three countries. So it's a lot of engagement, a lot of transparency, a lot of exchange of technology and understanding and information. For us, of course, we had to deal with a number of export control issues, which we were able to do very quickly. It's a lot of hard work with Congress, within the interagency, and also with our other two partners. But it's a model. It's a model for how we can deal with these new challenges that we have, and we can hopefully use that for other situations as well.
So you mentioned export controls,
Mhm.
and we also are talking about with AUKUS specifically some of our most sensitive technologies being nuclear powered submarines.
Mhm.
How do you protect your intellectual property, your most sensitive secrets, but then still have this cooperation that needs to
Right.
come up with a partner? What was the kind of um, uh, efforts that it took to be able to get that level of coordination that you were talking about?
Well, it's very fortunate that we already have this kind of exchange of information. We have the Five Eyes, of course, which includes the US, the UK, and Australia. So we already had kind of a basis to build upon in terms of sharing sensitive information, classified information up to a point. So we were building on that, and of course, with the export control and regulations, we worked very closely with them to get to a point that we felt that we could all be comfortable with the information that we were exchanging. We were concerned, for example, about information from schools that could be taken by individuals from other countries, sensitive information that we'd be working on together, that others would certainly want to get their hands on. And so working with these countries, developing an understanding about the things we are very concerned about. I think the U.S. is probably the most worried about that. We're worried, but also the most things ready in terms of making sure sensitive information is held to a very close level. There's a lot of exchange, a lot of discussions, a lot of troops overseas, a lot of work with Congress.
Were there any concerns about um, how expanding the access to these defense technologies might create some new vulnerabilities? Is there some
Um,
discussion associated with that?
That's always a concern. You don't necessarily know what these, because a lot of these technologies, like you said, are new, and we're still developing a lot of them. So there's a lot of questions about these technologies. Of course, we are most familiar with AI. I mean, that's everywhere. But there are many that are still being developed. So I think you always have to take into account that there are going to be things that happen that you don't always anticipate.
Right.
But you always have to be ready to address them as they come up and find ways to keep this information secure.
Um, with non-proliferation norms under pressure, what institutional or diplomatic mechanisms could help maintain transparency and accountability in these partnerships?
Well, one of the first things we focused on, and first thing I thought about was nuclear nonproliferation, and ensuring that one countries understood that this was not giving Australia nuclear weapons, which we can't do under the Nuclear Nonproliferation Treaty, but help providing nuclear powered submarines, which the U.S. and the UK already have. But we also recognize that others outside these three countries, particularly domestically, but also other countries in the region, were also going to be concerned. So there was a strong effort from the very beginning to make it very clear that these were nuclear power submarines. So we held meetings with NGOs and others in the U.S. When we first started talking about it. We launched it. We had others in the UK and Australia did the same thing with their domestic constituents, and then we also had to talk to countries in the region. We wanted to make sure that countries in the region also were, we answered their questions about what it is. There was a lot of confusion, which is understandable. But we took the time and effort, particularly Australia took a lot of time talking to countries in their region who were most concerned and making sure that they understood exactly what was taking place.
Right. New Zealand comes to mind because they've got a strong anti-nuclear
Yes.
program.
And I got to see it up front because I went to New Zealand, not to talk about AUKUS, but to just to visit the country to talk about a number of other issues we worked on. And they weren't at that point even a consideration for AUKUS because we weren't at the point of thinking about other countries. But there was a lot of people there who were upset about even the word nuclear.
Well, what role should multilateral institutions play in enforcing the rules and sharing technology among partners? Assuming organizations such as NATO, but others as well.
Particularly our International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, for a number of reasons. One is that in the meetings that were happening at the IEA, China was always very vocal about AUKUS, very vocal about their concerns about AUKUS. So it was something that the IAEA General Conference everybody had to deal with on a regular basis because they would raise the issue all the time. They would raise it pretty much everywhere, but the IAEA in particular. So it came up a lot there, and also because it's nuclear and nuclear nonproliferation issues, so naturally IAEA is going to be involved. but also because the IAEA Director General Grossi actually provided reports on a regular basis about what he was seeing, what the IAEA was seeing, and just reporting out to all of the members his perceptions of AUKUS. And there were also a lot of meetings with the U.S., UK, and Australia with the IAEA. So they play and will continue to play a very important role in this effort.
So I imagine those are all based on trying to, uh, actually, we're gonna go ahead and move to some questions and answers.
Okay.
So does folks have any, please?
Ambassador, great to have you here. What is going on with China? China has been having a major buildup of weapons. Its navy is substantially increased in recent years, and in particular with Taiwan. Like, how does all this fit with the work that you do to maintain the status quo, ideally in Taiwan, so that China doesn't decide to invade? Could you talk a little bit about the China buildup and Taiwan?
Good question about what is going on with China, and I can say that we know, for example, as you said, they're building up their military capability, they're building up their nuclear weapons, but they have not been particularly opaque about why. We can surmise why they are doing it, but quite frankly, since they for so many years held a number of nuclear weapons that was low and felt that that was all they needed to feel that they could respond if they were attacked. Um, but they, suddenly started to grow more. And so very often during the Biden administration, we kept reaching out to China to establish some regular ongoing discussions about, can we just talk about what's going on? And of course, I would meet with my counterparts if I was at different places, whether it's the UN or in Geneva. But something sustained. We weren't able to get with them. And neither was any of our close allies. So in France, UK, Germany, everybody tried to establish something more consistent because I don't think they wanted to have anything consistent. I don't think they wanted to really talk about what's really going on there. And even when we met with them, we were talking about can we have some confidence building, not necessarily arms control because we knew they weren't going to do that. But even there, it was very challenging to actually have some conversations with them. So, as far as Taiwan, it's interesting because whenever I would approach them and say, let's have some conversations, very often I got back Taiwan. It was like, so it was like, yeah, but Taiwan. So Taiwan remains an issue. Of course, this administration will address that as it see fits. But during the Biden administration, we were still providing them with security assistance and those kinds of things.
Yes, we've got another question.
All right,
I
thank
can
you.
talk for everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Ambassador. I'm Torkin Service with the Embassy of Norway. This is very interesting, and you talked about the importance of institutions to non-proliferation. I wanted to ask you about the importance of, or your thoughts about the relationship between non-proliferation and extended nuclear deterrence, because to my mind that has been crucial to maintaining the level of non-proliferation that we have, and it seems sadly that it's the faith and trust in extended nuclear deterrence is not quite what it used to be. So I would appreciate it if you could talk to that topic further.
Yes, of course, and I agree with you. I think there's a strong connection between nuclear non-proliferation and extended deterrence. That goes for NATO. It goes for our partners, South Korea and Japan. So it's been obviously the main way that we have been able to keep fewer countries developing nuclear weapons, and which remains extremely important. So I think it's always important to reinforce that commitment so that countries under the nuclear umbrella that we have with them understand that our commitment is ironclad. And we had many meetings to the Biden administration, obviously with South Korea and Japan. We've done a number of things in some of these exchanges to show them our commitment by having big institutions over there, for example, actually doing things like that. So yes, I think I totally agree with you, and I also agree with you that we need to keep doing that. We need to ensure that countries know that we have their backs and that they don't need to develop nuclear weapons because our commitment is ironclad.
Please.
Hello. I'm interested in the question, the way in which it used to be a bipartisan consensus about U.S. foreign policy during the Cold War. And the way what we've seen in recent administrations is the way that it whipsaws back and forth when it goes from a Republican to a Democrat back to a Republican administration. How do we reassure allies and partners, or how do we come to terms with the fact that we don't have a coherent foreign policy from administration to administration?
Well, it is unfortunate that that is the case. I think, there was a strong, for example, there was a strong support for Ukraine at one point, and then, you see how that in Congress itself, and of course, the current administration, obviously having daily different ideas about countries, which makes it even more challenging. So, it's hard to say how you reassure because, it's been such an extreme in the past, 4 administrations. And we understand that countries know what our politics are. And actually, people outside the U.S. probably know our politics and more than a lot of our folks here in the U.S., as I've seen in some cases. We just have to find ways to reinforce that not everybody thinks the same way, and that there are those of us in the U.S. who are very committed to our alliances and to our commitments, and our government does change, and we hopefully that get back to the point where we can do what some of us really think we should be doing when we think it's right.
Ambassador, thank you so
20
much.
minutes already.
Yeah.
That was good.
I want to thank you so much for your service, and also thank you for your leadership on this, because that cooperation agreement, which is so very important. Appreciate your time.